There are also, for some employers, very specific financial reasons why they might want to avoid hiring an older worker or something like that. So, for example, an employer may feel that it really makes more sense financially for them to hire somebody younger or to replace an older worker with somebody younger. They may feel that older workers are more likely to use health benefits. As unfeeling as this sounds, they may feel like they're going to get more years of work out of a younger worker before they have to start paying retirement benefits. Often, younger workers will accept being paid less because they know they have less experience. Now, can I make all-encompassing statements about older workers and how they perform on the job, or would that be the wrong thing to do? Well, no, absolutely, yes, I can. Older workers tend to be absent less. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, studies of work loss due to illness show that workers age 65 and older have attendance records equal to or even better than those of other age groups. Older workers tend to be loyal to their workplace, to demonstrate motivation to work, and their output is at least comparable to that of younger workers. So older workers have a strong work ethic, and because of that, they tend to be more satisfied and happy in their work than younger workers. In fact, an older worker that is in good physical condition may even outwork a younger person that's not in good physical shape. And the U.S. Bureau of Labor reports that employees age 45 and over tend to have better safety records than younger workers. Now, for example, the WSIB in Ontario, Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, what we all just call workers' comp, they'll tell you that a new employee is more likely to be injured on the job than an older employee. Now, a common stereotype is that older workers, well, they take longer to train and that's more of a hassle. Even if that is true, considering what kind of worker they are, it's worth it. And I'm going to give you a specific example here. I think everybody has heard of the Days Inn, which is a hotel chain in both Canada and the United States. Currently, more than 30% of their workforce is made up of older people. The head office for Days Inn is in Atlanta, Georgia, and they compared the costs and benefits of hiring older workers versus younger workers. They found that after a half day of computer familiarization training, that older workers could be trained to operate sophisticated computer software in the same time as younger workers. They found that older workers stayed on the job much longer than younger workers, an average of 3 years compared to 1. And that means they have less average annual training and recruiting costs per position. It found that older workers are better salespeople. They generate additional revenue for the company by booking more reservations than younger workers. Now, they do take longer to handle each call in the reservation center, but they do a better job. And they found that older workers are more flexible than younger workers in terms of assignments and what shifts they're willing to work. So take that in terms of stereotypes about older workers. Yes, there are laws in place to prohibit against ageism in the workplace in both the U.S. and Canada. In the U.S., it is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, or the ADEA. And what this does is forbid age discrimination against people who are 40 or older. And some states have also enacted laws to protect younger workers from being discriminated against. What this does is prohibit discrimination in any aspect of employment. Hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, training, benefits, and anything else you can think of in regards to employment. This also makes it illegal to harass somebody because of his or her age. So harassment like a derogatory remark or an offensive comment. Now, this can be more of a gray area since people will, tease each other in a friendly way. For example, my mom's in her late 80s. When I'm taking her somewhere, I'll say, okay, Mom, don't get all old lady on me when we get there. And she laughs and says, okay, I promise. And she knows what I mean by getting all old lady is getting fussy and very, very unflexible. But she also knows I'm teasing her. However, this would be considered harassment at work when it's so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or an offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision. This even applies to people who don't work for the company. So, when you're working for me, you don't have to put up with this from a client or a customer. Canada also has laws in place to prevent ageism. In Ontario specifically, we have the Ontario Human Rights Code. And this is very clear that it's illegal to discriminate against somebody on the basis of age. You can't discriminate against somebody on the basis of age in terms of where they work or where they live or when providing services. So in Ontario, generally, a person has the right to be offered the same chances in employment as everybody else. You can't deny somebody a job or training or promotion. And you can't force them to retire because of their age. Now, there are a few exceptions in this regard, but for the most part, mandatory retirement is not allowed in Ontario. In Ontario, an employer cannot unfairly target older workers or other age groups when it comes to reducing staff or reorganizing staff. And not only that, they have to be proactive in ensuring that ageism does not exist in their workplace. So very, very specific. It's not just a matter of saying don't discriminate against older people. Now, even with this, ageism continues to exist. In 2006, a survey of older workers occurred, which indicated that perspectives of older workers were in some ways very good, in some ways very bad. So there wasn't a lot of consistency. On one hand, in response to a question asking if older workers are with the times, 90% agreed, which is very positive. However, 70% also said that they didn't think their company valued older workers. Now, it's theorized that ageism in regard to older people, as well as in regard to employment specifically, is just so institutionalized that to most people it's almost invisible. And when younger supervisors have lower expectations of older workers, for example, or exaggerate and go on and on and on about what they can or can't do at their age, and there will still be legal cases brought to the courts, even with these very clear, very detailed laws in place. When an employee is let go because of a legitimate reason, that's legal. When they're let go for any other reason, it's up to them to take the initiative to bring legal action. And I'll give you some examples. In 1996, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the suit of a 56-year-old worker who had been replaced by a 40-year-old worker. This was the legal case of O'Connor versus Consolidated Coin Caterers Corporation. And this is an especially significant case because it's not like the 56-year-old was being replaced by somebody in their 20s. They were being replaced by somebody who was also middle-aged at age 40. The Supreme Court ruled this was still discriminatory because the older person was replaced with a substantially younger worker, even if the other worker was still middle-aged. In 1997, the Ceridian Corporation and Control Data Corporation paid nearly $25 million to more than 300 former employees who claimed they were fired because of their age. And what the company would do was lay off older workers and then wait a few months and replace them with younger workers. In 1997, Westinghouse Electric settled 2 age discrimination suits. In Los Angeles County, a 78-year-old physician for the medical unit of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office was returned to his job after the county settled his claim that he was forced to retire. A news correspondent was awarded a settlement from CBS on age discrimination as well. And when it comes to news correspondence, when you look at this online, there's absolutely a gender tinge to that. Female news correspondents or weather people or whatever position they fulfill are much more likely to be discriminated against because of age than male news respondents, weather people, that are in front of the camera. Now, this all sounds great, that people have the option to seek redress. But the thing is, going to court for something is incredibly stressful. It costs a lot of money and time and effort. And even for those people who win, a third to a half of the settlements awarded can be eaten up by legal costs. And we are likely to see age as a basis for discrimination in employment to become less and less likely because in our job market, technological skills are increasingly important and more recently trained people. So, on one hand, that doesn't require physical labor. It's not manual labor. So on one hand, in terms of age, physical strength is not needed as much. However, on another hand, younger people are likely to have the most current skills. There's one particular suit that's currently taking place in the United Kingdom between 200 people who worked for Intel, which is a data corporation. They produce microchips. And the workers claimed the company uses a system of ranking and rating to assess employees. So it ranks employees on equal to or slower than other employees. And it's argued that this absolutely has to do with age, that it has an age tinge to it. Anybody receiving 2 out of 3 or 2 consecutive slower thans is automatically put on a disciplinary corrective action program. And then if you don't reach a set target by a certain time, you lose your job. So the claim is that there's a disproportionate number of people receiving slower thans that are older workers or workers with disabilities, 2 groups that are protected by anti-discrimination laws. Now, Intel completely denies this, and they say it remains as flexible as possible in the face of intense competition in their business, which requires them to have employees that can work at a certain pace. However, 90% of their laid off workers were over 40, not just over 60 or over 50, over 40. That's 90% of the laid off workers, and 40% of the laid off workers had some kind of disability. In the US, a former Intel engineer who was laid off has also sued the company, saying that he was dismissed because of his age. In fact, he could specifically cite statements made by his manager. His manager said to him, "If you think age is an advantage in this job, you are a mistake. At your age, you should be retired. You must realize that at your age, your mind cannot be as sharp as when you were 20 or 30 years old." Now, his supervisor is also an idiot, because his supervisor also said to him, "Jews created a lot of problems in the world. Look at socialism." And the complainant is Jewish. So clearly the manager is an idiot for several reasons. One of his idiotic components is ageism. Now, how do the workers themselves see this? What are the most common complaints of age discrimination by older workers? Well, first is somebody being told that their position is terminated. So, we just don't have the job for you anymore. You happen to be 58, 54. We don't have the job anymore. But then once they're let go, they find out that somebody else was hired to replace them. Another very common example of discrimination is the company or the business, whatever it is, saying that, we have to downsize, these are hard times, da 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 da. But wouldn't you know it, when the downsizing occurs, it's only older workers who are let go, and that's it. Another main complaint from older workers is that their retirement pension is stalled. So what this means is, you can continue working, but we've got regulations or rules in place so that you can no longer contribute to your retirement pension if you do. So it's like forcing them out. And the fourth main reason that older workers cite for them being let go is medical. It's not safe for you to continue doing this job. It's for a medical reason. And they're saying, look, I might be older, but there's no medical reason for me not to be working. So we've got this age discrimination that takes place in employment. Those are the four main complaints by older workers. Now, in terms of older workers, retirement, being let go, etc., that's kind of one issue. Another one is looking for work when you're over 40. And again, not over 50, just over 40. Oh, and I'm just realizing it says over age 40 are likely to remain, but should be an N at the end. Clearly, there is a difference between being technically retired and looking for work and being unemployed. There are older workers who are not retired, who want to be employed, but they can't find work. And the fact is, when a person loses a job later on in their life compared to if they were younger, it can be especially difficult to find employment. Downsizing, restructuring, re-engineering, outsourcing, reduction in force, layoffs. It used to be that somebody was unemployed. You could pretty safely assume they were younger, unskilled, and blue collar. That is no longer the case, as somebody who is an older, skilled, white-collar worker is just as likely to be unemployed. And an added dimension in this is the progression of technology, which often means a need for retraining so that you're not obsolete as an unemployed older worker. That's something an employer is less likely to do with somebody who's older. Why hire somebody who needs training when I can hire somebody who doesn't need the training? The age category that suffered the most from downsizing is age 45 to 55. And without being dramatic at all, losing your job at that age can be catastrophic. Once out of work, older workers are likely to remain unemployed much longer than younger co-workers, because comparably, they are considered less desirable as a prospective employee for many reasons. So job hunting can be an ongoing depressing nightmare. And if they do find work, it's often at a much, much lower salary with fewer fringe benefits. Objectively speaking and legally speaking, age should not be a factor in looking for work, but it is. Thus, many end up draining what they had saved for retirement, draining their assets, and if or when they do find employment again, they just don't have the time needed to re-prepare for retirement. This is a link to a video which is really, really good. It's about an older gentleman who has had exactly this happen, who was, management position and lost his job, and how he's had to deal with it. Now, there's an added dimension for those in the U.S. Now, Canada is not perfect, and I'm not suggesting we are, and I certainly have my own criticisms of our healthcare system based on my own and my family's experiences with it. However, in the U.S., an older, unemployed worker has the added burden of having to worry about basic health insurance if they lose their job. In the U.S., Medicare coverage doesn't begin until a person is 65, so if they lose their job, they may be completely uninsured because most Americans purchase their health insurance through their employer. They can purchase it on their own independently, but it becomes much, much more expensive. Now, there has developed since the 90s employment resources specifically for older unemployed workers. So employment agencies for people specifically over 50 or specifically over 40. So for example, Seniors for Hire connects people 50 or older with companies looking for mature employees. Workforce 50 has a job board that companies post directly to. There is retiredbrains.com with listings for work that you can do at home. There's one called Rentagramma, which specializes in work for nannies, caregivers, chefs, house care helpers, pet sitters, tutors, and personal assistants. But these are really just a drop in the bucket compared to what is needed for somebody over 40 to find work. Now, yes, some large businesses and corporations have started to do things differently when they let somebody go. So they offer more severance pay to laid off workers, or they'll provide them assistance to help them find another occupation. So for example, Pacific, Telesis, Chevron, AT&T, Rockwell, IBM, and Kodak have a severance program that will pay tuition and expenses for retirees to go back to school to become teachers in kindergarten through 12th grade. But they do that in California because there's such an enormous teacher shortage in parts of California. General Electric and AT&T now provide classes to teach employees the latest changes in technology to help them stay updated and avoid being let go. And then Pitney Bowes, which is another large tech company in the US, has a retirement educational assistance program. And in this, employees and their spouses over age 50 are eligible for tuition reimbursement up to $300 per person per year to help them obtain another job. But again, these are a drop in the bucket. So as explained, sure, there's laws and regulations in place to prevent somebody being laid off or let go because of their age. And in regards to not hiring somebody because of their age, and somebody can get the courts involved in regard to not being hired or fired or not being rehired due to ageism. But they are highly unlikely to have even a chance of winning without a lawyer, which requires financial resources. For those that do work, a substantial number of older adults are employed. And it's estimated that a quarter of all people who retire will actually begin working again in some capacity within 4 years for different reasons. Whether or not somebody is interested in working after they've already retired is really an individual thing, and it's going to be affected by their personal characteristics. If somebody's looked forward to retirement and they have planned for it in terms of how to spend their time, they've got leisure activities, they'll be less likely to want to work and would actually resent it if they had to. Other people plan to always work in some way. And there's different options for work for older workers. Full-time, part-time, temporary or contract work, also known as gig work, bridge work, and job sharing. Now, the first one we're going to look at is phased retirement. In the late 90s, a study occurred that concluded that more than half of all workers would continue working if their employer were willing to either retrain them for a new job or to allow them to alter their hours somewhat, whether that meant fewer hours or less responsibility. Is this a possibility for everybody? No, but some workers do continue to work, choosing phased retirement. So it's more of a gradual retirement, not just stopping all at once. And as I said, they may cut their hours, whether that's fewer hours every day or fewer days per week. They may share their job with somebody who is younger. And depending on the employer, this may be really valuable for the employer as well, because it allows them to keep a more knowledgeable and experienced worker on staff to assist in training others. And it's a good situation for the employee who can continue to work, but they don't have the full responsibility. So to give you a few specific examples of how this might occur, there's a tech firm in California called Varian Associates, and they offer reduced work schedules before retirement. Doesn't mean a person can just pick and choose how the phased retirement occurs. So the first phase in this program means that the employee will have a 4-day work week for a year, and then a 3-day work week in the second year. And then if they want it, in the third year, they can go right down to part-time. Corning Incorporated have what they call a 40% work option. What this does is allow somebody when they retire to collect their pension, but also to continue working 2 days a week at a reduced salary. Now, that's not available to everybody. They have to be at least 58, and they have to have been with the company for at least 20 years. Polaroid has what they call a rehearsal for retirement program that allows employees to take unpaid leaves of absence up to 6 months. So that would be really valuable, right? Because it's like, okay, I'm going to take 6 months off and then I'll go back to work. That's one option, which is phased retirement. Of course, another option is part-time work. It's not uncommon for an older person to take on part-time work. In fact, some companies specifically recruit older workers to work part-time. McDonald's, Walmart, Walt Disney World in the States, and all these companies openly promote this to the public to demonstrate that they value older workers. You know, when you go to Home Depot, I don't know about you, but I specifically look for the older guys. I don't want to talk to the younger employees because I know they know what they're talking about. And there's other companies that do the same, but in a manner that benefits the company more. So for example, in Connecticut, there's a large travel insurance company called Travelers Insurance, original name. And what they do is provide early retirement incentive packages to employees at the top of their salary grid. Then, even though they're receiving their full pension, they'll rehire them part-time as they are needed. And the company even has what are known as unretirement parties to recruit pensioned workers, where they explain the ins and outs of their bank of available jobs, including part-time work and contract work. Is this beneficial for those retired workers who make use of this program? Absolutely. But also think about what this means for the company. It means the company doesn't have to train new people to work part-time. They don't have to include new people in their pension fund. So it's not just some kind of altruistic exercise on their part. Another company that not only hires retired workers but specifically recruits them is a company called FW Dodge. This company is in Kansas. It is a data gathering firm. And the reason they started specifically recruiting retired workers was because they were having such a difficult time hiring part-time employees that were dependable. So because of that, they started specifically recruiting retirees. FW Dodge Company ended up filling 90% of their part-time positions with retirees. Think about that, 90% with retirees. And the company has said they find that their older employees are more reliable and more detail-oriented. And being a data company, that is extremely important. So this is Dodge Data and Analytics. So, but I mean, think about that. 90% of their part-time jobs are with people over age 50 that they have specifically recruited. So it's not just that, you know, I don't know, for some reason, all these older people suddenly applied to this company. No, they specifically recruited them because they find them to be such valuable workers. And not just in some kind of philosophical sense. No, they really prefer them to younger workers. Another option is job sharing, which can be linked to part-time work and can be linked to phased retirement. Job sharing provides an older worker a lot of flexibility, and it just means you've got 2 people working part-time and combined they equal 1 worker. That doesn't mean you're working on the same thing or with the same person, because there's different kinds of job sharing. Yeah, with the twins model, you work together with somebody else. That can be really beneficial, having an older trained employee who can kind of guide a younger one. Then the island model of job sharing just means you've got 2 part-time workers, but either their work is unrelated or for whatever reason they're on different tasks. If an older employee is not yet ready to retire but wants to reduce their hours, this would work perfectly with phased retirement. And again, Polaroid promotes job sharing for employees, offering permanent part-time work to employees 55 and over. So this is a really valuable arrangement. Bridge jobs are something different. Many older people want to work full-time, and that would include a bridge job. Some bridge jobs are part-time or contract. A bridge job is just that. It fills a gap. So a very descriptive term. These are jobs that fill the gap between full-time regular adult employment, and by regular adult employment I mean before retirement. It may be full-time or any other format. It may be a completely different job than what the adult did for their full-time employment as an adult before retiring. It may be the same job. As I said, it's become increasingly common for people, both men and women, to work over age 60. And you know, if you look at this chart, since 1977, it's become more and more common, not just for older people to keep working, but to work full time. A bridge job is more likely, however, to be part-time. So again, this is just another option. Now, this video, I've just got to insist that you watch this. In part, for several reasons. Yes, it's related specifically to this. Second, because I think it's just such a wonderful program with this company where the vast majority of their workers are people over age 60. It's a company that produces different kinds of needles. So needles for mechanized industry, needles for the veterinary industry, all different kinds of needles and tubes. And I got to tell you, as a person whose mother has great difficulty with stairs, when you see the woman that is 100 years old going up and down that huge flight of stairs, I was holding my breath watching it. So I highly, highly recommend you watch this. A, because it's interesting. B, because it just gave me such a good feeling seeing these people work. And C, because when the employer is speaking, they indicate exactly why they prefer to hire older people. Another option for working at old age is gig work. What is a gig work? Temporary, part-time, contract. You got a short-term gig. This means a person is hired for a specified length of time, which means the employee will have much more flexibility to do what they want to do. And this can also serve as a bridge to retirement. This is good for employers as well because it allows them to hire somebody with a lot of experience or training, but not for a long period of time. Now, unfortunately, most gig work doesn't usually occur with jobs at the higher end of the occupational ladder. And because it's gig work, you're not going to have health benefits or anything like that. But this is another option. And the last option I want to point out is self-employment. It's become more and more common for older people to turn to self-employment when they retire. It's much easier than waiting to be hired by somebody else. Their self-employment may be based on what they did for a living. It may be based on a hobby or something that they've turned into a business. You know, how often do you see somebody who retires and they've always done woodworking and they turn it into a small side business when they retire? This is a picture of Reg. Reg is the guy that came and took out 4 tree stumps in my backyard, each of which weighed over 4 tons. Should have seen the kids in the neighborhood. It was like the most thrilling day for them because they could sit there and watch the big Bob the Builder machines. Reg did this when he worked for the city. Reg is retired now. Reg decided to start his own business on his own. That was Port Grammar. So that's what Reg does in his retirement. He's got his own little side business going on and he's self-employed. That's just one example. It doesn't have to be hands-on. It could be something on computers, anything like this. And just as a side note, apart from these, what I would call like official employment options for older people, there's other options as well. Different programs they can participate in. In the US, there's something called the Green Thumb program that pays older people living near or under the poverty level minimum wage to plant trees and look after parks. You know, Canada as well has the foster grandparent program who employs older people near the poverty line to work with deprived children. So there's a whole bunch of options available for older workers. Now, just to summarize this, first of all, what are all these pictures? I came across this online and I just loved it. This is an older worker at Walmart somewhere in the States. And the particular Walmart she's at, she just, I guess just for fun one day, her and a couple of the other workers, when it wasn't funny, started taking pictures of her with things people could buy at Walmart. And so the Walmart started posting them on their Facebook page. And I thought this was really funny. So, summary. More and more people are working much longer than they ever have before. Yes, retirement is still significant. It's still widely considered a major life event that everybody looks forward to. The fact is, not everybody's thrilled with the idea of retirement, either because financially they have to keep working, or because they technically can afford to retire, but they just don't want to, for a whole variety of reasons. Then we also have to consider employment for older people in terms of people who have been laid off or fired or whatever, and they're unemployed before they're retired. So we have to keep that separate in our head. You know, when you think of older workers, we automatically consider people who are at least minimally financially stable. And the fact is, that's becoming less and less likely. You know, we see these commercials on TV and we see print ads and magazines that always, always, always depict retirement as this wonderful time in life where you can finally sit back and relax. But the fact is, for many people, that is simply not the case. So they have to keep working.